Hello, today I'm going to be doing a Prospector presentation, and it's a Prospector overview. So here are the things that I plan to cover in this presentation. What is Prospector? And really what I want to talk about there is the architecture and the setup, how it's arranged, how Prospector works. And this is really to cover how your library connects to Prospector, also the operations of Prospector and what libraries are participating. We'll also talk a little bit about statistics, and then lending and borrowing, the three different Prospector interfaces that some people may not be aware of, that there's three, searching and requesting, and then I want to go over some of our staff resources too. So for those of you who are familiar with Prospector, this slide will be very familiar. But basically Prospector is two pieces, the discovery and requesting. And what makes it unique, or at least what made it unique in the past, is that patron placeholds were not that common. And so with Prospector, what's really nice is the patron can place that hold, and so it doesn't have to be mediated by a librarian or a staff member. And the other thing is that it does not replace your local ILS, but really it just extends it to a lot more. So if you're somebody new to Prospector, you'll notice your local system, and then Prospector, if it's not found in the local system, then you'll be able to search, even transfer that search into Prospector. It operates on InReach software, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. And then the other thing that Prospector's used for that some may not know is that it is used as a way to purchase for collection development reasons. So libraries will often look at Prospector to find out, like, if they have like the last copy, and to determine, like, should it be weeded or not. So it's nice because you can see the entire catalog and everything, everyone else's holdings, and then based on that make a collection development decision. Prospector, so the operations with Prospector, so the Alliance runs the Prospector InReach server and also the Prospector database, which is kind of a separate server. And so those are actually stored in our server room here. And then we also have two standing committees for Prospector, and these committees started when, in the very beginning of Prospector, when it was being developed, there were two committees that made some policy decisions for Prospector, and these are the Cataloging Reference Committee, which still meets, and also the Document Delivery Committee. And the Catalog Reference one deals more with cataloging issues, display issues, and how the public interface looks, things like that, how things are more of the public display. And then the document delivery group works on issues that involve circulation, things like lost books, and any kind of questions that come up regarding policies in terms of lending and borrowing. And then we have an annual Prospector Directors meeting, and at that meeting we invite all the directors from Prospector libraries, and we go over the budget and look at things like, if we wanted to, buy a different, or license some more different software for Prospector. For example, when we did Encore, that was something that we presented at the directors meeting, so that all the directors kind of could look at that and make decisions. And that's just held once a year, kind of to give people an update and go over the budget and that kind of a thing. And then this is the Prospector team. As you can tell, we're kind of a small organization, so there's two of us. And really what we do is mainly deal with just the union catalog of Prospector. We do not have any of the circulation data and any of the cataloging records. We primarily just work with the union catalog and records that are updated into Prospector. So libraries in Prospector, there's currently 42, and there's kind of an equal number, as you can see, between academics and publics. Fewer academic libraries, but lots of big publics, and then we've also gotten some smaller publics in the Marmot Consortia. And then we also have 4 special libraries. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the 3 interfaces. So the first one you're you may be more familiar with, this is our newest one, which is Encore. And what we've been trying to do is encourage libraries, when you start your search in your local catalog, to actually transfer the search into the Encore interface if you're using a discovery interface like Encore or one of the other ones like ViewFind. And then the classic interface, and a lot of times this is more of the librarian's interface because it supports things like OCLC number searches and medical number searches. But this was the traditional, Webpack interface, and if you're using Classic at your site, then the only way to transfer a search into Prospector is through the Classic interface. But we are trying to get people a little bit more comfortable with Encore, since that's what they're used to seeing in other kinds of software products. And then finally we have the mobile interface, and this is actually just a mobile website. It's not an application. And I'm going to go ahead and show you this on the computer. You can see the way that the screen is that it would be, it's kind of a vertical setup, so it's made for like some type of a mobile device. So if this were on an iPhone, obviously it would be a lot more narrow than this and vertical. But you can just place a search. And then you'll notice here what we've done is we've kind of slimmed this interface down so it just shows the most important information. So we have the Request It button. If I go to the full record, I can get a little bit more information. 36 libraries have this title. But for the most part, this is supposed to be just a really quick request screen. And what is nice about this screen is that, or about this interface, is that you can request right there, and it does do the user authentication and everything. Oops, I skipped up a little. And so I'm going to talk a little bit, we already talked a little bit actually about these, but Encore, so the advantages of Encore, and again, if you're new to Prospector, this will be new information hopefully, but we have facets that categorize things by, for example, by format or by author, and then there's also tagging so that you have the word cloud on the right-hand side of the screen, and that allows you to kind of narrow your search or look at other search terms. And so it's a much more of a discovery interface than the traditional Webpack. And the other thing that's nice about it is that all the changes that happen in Classic are immediately updated to the Encore version. And it does support, and as time has gone by, III has made Encore support more of the searches. So we now have keyword, journal title, author, ISBN, and call number. So it does support quite a few of the search types. Now the Classic catalog, which again, if you're using Classic at your local site, then you'll go into a Classic search into Encore if the search is transferred in. The one advantage here is that you can search by OCLC number and medical number, ERIC document number. Also, it's nice because you can get to a MARC record, so sometimes if you need more information about the bibliographic record, this is a very easy way to do it with the Classic interface, and you actually can't do that in Encore. So that's why it's much more of a librarian's interface. Another subtlety is that the Classic interface searches the actual author and title indices, where the Encore interface is the keyword. So in some cases this may make a difference if you're doing some more in-depth research. I think for the most part though, with Encore, even if you do an author search in that keyword box, there's a facet where you can look at authors. So in some ways I think it's still probably advantageous to use the Encore interface, especially for the public who are more used to the discoverable interfaces. The other thing that we have in Classic, and this was something we developed before Encore came, is a link that takes you to other resources. And this is something else that I will go ahead and show you here. Well, we'll just So I'm going to do this search for Tina Facebook, and I get to a bib record, and you can see this find more resources. So I click on here, and this is, let's say all the copies are checked out or on hold. Somebody wants to figure out where they can get it, then it's we have links to all these other resources. So it takes this ISBN number, and it will go to, it transfers it into WorldCat, to HathiTrust, find a copy online, or you could even buy it online now. And so we just have different sources there for people to link out to in case they weren't able to find it in Prospector, or there's like long holds on the item. The next thing is this is just a geographical look at Prospector, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when we go over statistics, because as you can see, we're really spread out all over Colorado, and also into Wyoming. So Wyoming right now is the only out-of-state library we have, but we have a great geographical spread, and what really makes this all possible is the statewide courier, so we can get items out to libraries all over. So I want to talk a little bit about how Prospector is built. So as I mentioned, I think earlier, we have this InReach Union Catalog software at the Alliance, and that's all we have is the Union Catalog. So we don't know about your circulation, we don't have any acquisitions information or cataloging. And what happens is that records are updated in real time to the InReach catalog. And so what we can see is like records that are loading into the catalog. And there's one master record, and then there's also attached holdings, and we'll talk a little bit more about that too. So more about the bib, the record loading process. So what we're getting from local sites are the bib records, the bib and the circulation transaction. So when something's checked out, all those various statuses in transit, all of that information is sent to the central catalog. And then the other thing is each site has its own loading queue. So for example, if one site loads 50,000 records, this does not interfere with another another site's record loading. But it may interfere with, like, let's say somebody checked out or somebody loads 50,000 records. Well, a checkout happens in the middle of that process. Somebody, you check something out on your local system. It may not show up into Prospector until that 50,000 record load that was before it finishes. So that'll happen sometimes. We might get a call that says, I checked this item out. It shows up in our local catalog, and this is 6 hours ago, and it's still not showing up in Prospector. So the first thing we would check for is to see if your queue is backed up. And in that case, you might, talk to the cataloging department. What's nice is that the queue may be backed up, but eventually it will catch up, and that item will be checked out. The other thing with Prospector is it requires certain ports on each end to be open. So, for example, we have certain ports on our firewall that need to be open, and then there's ports on your firewall. And for more information about that, the IIII does have documentation on what specific ports need to be open. But once in a while, if there's a problem, we do check to make sure that the ports are open. And the symptom of that problem would be you're not connecting to Prospector. You're not uploading data. And then the record types that we actually load, that are actually loaded into Prospector, are bib records and item records, which are attached, and those include circulation status codes. We also have the summary serial holdings records as well as order records. The first, and then the other, speaking of records, is I wanted to talk a little bit about how records are matched in Prospector, because this will affect whether or not we have duplicate records in Prospector, or whether or not things get merged. And sometimes there's some confusion about, this is the exact same title and edition, why are they separate in Prospector? And so this matching algorithm sort of explains it. So the first match point in Prospector is the 001 field. And this is actually oftentimes the 001 field, if you're a cataloger, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But OCLC, which is a cataloging source, has a number, and it's usually a vendor. Wherever you get this bibliographic record, they assign a number to it. And so OCLC is kind of the most common one. But there's also vendor records from EBSCO or Serial Solutions, and so they will use a particular number. And so the main point to remember here is that the 001 field, and that's actually should just be 001 field. I think I have title on that screen, but that's what is the first match point. Now if the 001 field doesn't match, then, or if it does match, then Prospector will look for a secondary match point, which is the ISBN or ISSN combined with the title. And then if this matches, then the next thing it'll check for to determine, and this is more to determine who the master record holder will be in this case, and that when I say master record, I mean the one that is used as the bib record in Prospector. So if the matches occur, the encoding level is checked, and so catalogers have the choice to encode for example, if you're doing original cataloging and or if it's a record from OCLC, a very high quality record, you're going to do the highest encoding level. But if it's just a small vendor record, you'd probably choose a lower encoding level. And so what happens is if a record has a higher encoding level, that automatically becomes, then the record coming in, that automatically becomes the master record. If match occurs and the encoding levels are equal, then we have something in Prospector called the precedence table, and this is a list of the libraries in ranking order of which ones have the higher precedence. And so in this case we would check the precedence table, and the one with the higher level would be the master record. So it's just, this is kind of a simple explanation of how the record matching works in Prospector. So this screen just shows kind of just more of a diagram view of it. So on the left-hand side in the green, you can see the existing record in Prospector is Cat in the Hat and the 001 1234. The incoming record from the local system is exactly the same. It has the same title, the same ISSN, and so the two items are merged into one. So this next screen shows again the existing record in Prospector, but this time the 001 is different. So then it's going to before it says they don't match, it's going to try one more time the ISBN and the title. And so in this case, the ISBN is the same and the title are the same, so it says it's the same, it treats it as the same record and merges the two. And then here's a third example, and in this case you can see again the title's the same, but there is no match on the 001 field. And so if there is no match on the 001 in title, it's again going to try for the secondary match, which is on the ISBN and title. And so in this case again the ISBN numbers don't match even though the titles do, and so it creates a brand new record. And before we go to requesting, I just want to show you in the catalog an example of some of these of items that you would think might match, but they don't match because of the matching algorithm. So I'm going to go ahead and do this search in the classic interface because then I will be able to show the MARC record. and I'm going to go to the end because I have a few that match here. So as you can see going down the list, these seem to be the same. Cat in the Hat, Dr. Seuss, 1957, Random House. So I'm going to go ahead and click on one of these. And then I just click on Mark Display. And then as you can see here, this is the 001 field. And so right away what I notice, and you'll start to notice these if you look for them, are these prefixes, OCM. And so that's the 001. And so let's see what the following record has. So this record we just checked is 354. We're going to go to 355 now. Look at the Mark Display. And as you can see, this has got a different 001. Now one of the things that it also, remember, it does, even if it first checks the 001, and if those don't match, then it looks at, well, I should say the title and the 001. If those don't match, then it's going to look at the ISBN and the title. And so in this case, the title in the MARC record is in the 245 field all the time. Now in this case we don't have an ISBN, and so we can't do the secondary match. So this is, and I think the reason there isn't an ISBN is that this record is very, it's a very old title. It's from 1957, so it's possible that there just weren't ISBNs distributed at that time, or for some reason these 1957 editions of Cat in the Hat do not have ISBNs or ISBNs. And so this is why we see all of these records that are seemingly alike, yet they don't merge in Prospector. You know, here's another one. And again, a prefix on that 001 field, but there is no 020 to do that secondary match. And so what we end up with is lots of duplicate records. And so some of this, you know, can't be solved, but at least it gives you a reason. You know, we can look at it, and a lot of times it is catalogers communicating with each other and suppressing or unsuppressing a record. But this just goes to show that with a union catalog with 42 libraries, you are going to have lots of multiple titles. So now we'll move on to requesting. And in requesting in Prospector, you'll probably be familiar with this. You know, the user's prompted for an affiliation and name and library card. The system checks with the local OPAC to make sure you're in good standing, and then the user can select a pickup location. And the one thing I want to mention is that once the item, you know, they select their pickup location, and then they can say, you know, I want to place a hold on this item. When there's multiple copies, we do not, the system itself does this thing called load balancing on the back end. So for example, I see 2 copies of a book. I can't choose which one I want. The system will do all of that work for me. Unless, as I mentioned earlier, in this case, is if it's a multi-volume set. In that case, then the user can choose a volume. There'll be a pick list that comes up, and the user will be able to choose which volume they want. And so the system, we have something called a load balance table, and libraries kind of are weighted, and so it will go to certain libraries first, you know, if they have the item. And this is kind of weighted on different issues. What we try to do is like make it so that everybody contributes the same amount, you know, borrows as much as they lend. I mean, it's never perfect, but we try to keep that in balance. And then the other thing that the system will do is it's going to, if there's a series of items on a particular record and someone wants to place a hold and all these things are checked out, it's going to look for the one that is the soonest to come back but not overdue, because if it's overdue it assumes that it will not be coming back. So it does do that. Another thing that it will do is we've added geographical routing to Prospector, so now we have 2 groups. We have a metro group and a western slope group, and so it'll also look to try to find the item that's closest by the person who's requesting it, the borrower. So it's going to look for a library that's closer than one that's further away. One way to increase your odds of getting something is to put multiple requests on the same item. The system isn't smart enough to know. So that's completely fine to do that. And this is just a diagram to kind of explain the process. So we have the patron here sitting at her computer, and she's finds something in Prospector that she wants, and so she requests it, and then what Prospector does before anything is it's going to check back with the patron's local system, make sure she's in good standing, and then it will send a message back, and then it will do the load balancing. It'll be looking for libraries who can fulfill this request based on certain criteria, and then once it finds that library, it will send a request. Then that library will get that request, send out the item, and all the while these things are happening, remember they're always going through the inReach server, and so the messages are being exchanged, and they're actually numerical messages that you can, III has logs of these messages whenever a request is placed, and so you can kind of see the complete cycle of things, when it's requested, when it's in transit, when it's returned, and so forth. And so once the request is filled, the patron is contacted. That patron comes and picks up the item, and then when they return it, that severs the tie of the virtual item to the patron. And so this is kind of the process it takes to do a request. And everything is captured. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about policy type things in Prospector. So just so you know, libraries do have local control over what items can be delivered and what items they choose to, out of their collection, what they choose to lend to other libraries. And these are things that the committees thought about when we originally set up Prospector, and I think they wanted to keep it flexible enough so that libraries can choose to lend the kind of items that they want to lend, and it seems to be working pretty well. You have local control over which patrons can borrow, so it's up to you. If there's a certain class of patron that you don't want to borrow from Prospector, that's completely fine. You can set them up. Maybe there's visitor patrons or alumni or something, and you say, we don't want to deal with Prospector borrowing for them. That's fine. If a local copy is checked out or missing, it may be requested through Prospector, and that's actually a local policy as well. So some libraries say even if a local copy is showing up is available, we still let our patrons place a hold on it. So it just really depends on the library. System is sensitive to multi-volume sets, so particular volumes may be selected, which is nice. So if you find a record for Seinfeld Series 8, if you click on the record, and in most cases, if it's cataloged right, then you'll be able to choose what actual volumes you want instead of getting like an entire season of a series. And then here's some reasons that requests fail, and some of these are pretty obvious. Item is available at your local site, and that's true because a lot of libraries, I'd say the majority, if it's available at their local site, you can't check it out through Prospector. Obviously, if it's a reference book, and those will show up as local use only in Prospector, so in other words, the record was contributed to Prospector, but it can't be checked out, and so it'll just say local use only. Item is an electronic resource, and in most cases this is something in Prospector that we're grappling, and I think a lot of libraries are grappling with this, is how do you deal with all of the electronic content. We do have some open access collections or lendable ebooks. So for example, Springer is a publisher, and they've allowed libraries to lend their Springer ebooks. There's about 8 libraries in this contract for Springer, but they're allowing these libraries to lend them all throughout Prospector, and actually even beyond that. We also have the ERIC documents and other government documents. Another reason is a problem with the patron accounts, because remember, it's going to first make sure the patron is in good standing and doesn't have any blocks before it allows that patron to lend. I just wanted to give you a brief look at the circulation policy in Prospector. One thing to note on here is that it says 70 requests or checkouts per person. It used to be 40, and then the committee, the document delivery committee, talked a lot about this, and they decided to make it go up to 70, and the local loan rules should be trumping your Prospector one. So in other words, if you only allow your patrons to have 30 items, they should not be able to get to that, do more than that in Prospector. So in Prospector, there are over 12 million items and all kinds of items. And then, as I mentioned before, we also have Wyoming and olive, really cover all of Colorado. And this is just a breakdown. One of the things that I mentioned is that we are, these e-resources, trying to get to them is just not as easy as print. But as you can see here, I mean, this e-resource portion of the pie is pretty big, and it continues to grow. So in 5 years, it may be the reverse from the print to the e. So some of the frustrations from the end user, and you've probably had these questions maybe come across from users. Why can't I access an ebook? Whose controls this access? Is it the library? Is it the publisher? Is it some intermediate organization? In most cases, I think it is the publisher. I mean, the aggregators are, like EBSCO and ProQuest are just middlemen, and they're doing what the publisher, they can only do. They have to restrict the access to what the publisher says. The other confusion is that we do have some ebooks that are open access, so it's not, there's not really a good rule as to what's open access and what's not. And that's something that, again, because of restrictions on ebooks, there's not a lot we can do about that. And people are just used to getting things full text in this day and age. So I think there's a lot of confusion still around this one. And people don't understand, well, you could lend it a print book all over the world. Why can't we have the same access for ebooks? And a lot of this comes down to copyright, and there's a lot of differences here. So intellectual content is controlled by copyright law. So in the print world, it's pretty black and white. Anything, we have fair use, and anything before 1923 is open access, is freely, you can do what you want with it. But in the digital world, it's just not that easy. It's really based on the publisher and the kind of restrictions they placed, and most publishers just don't allow you to lend your e-content through interlibrary loan or through a union catalog like Prospector, where there's different libraries. We do happen, after on that screen I should say, we do have, there are also orphan works, which can make this complicated because it's hard to tell who maybe the author is. So the public domain, Prospector and ebooks, what can everyone use? And so you can see here we have quite a few collections that are open to anyone to use. One thing that you can do in Prospector is do a search on something like Project Gutenberg. And you can do that search in Encore, just Project Gutenberg, and it'll tell you about how many items there are. And so we have over 2,600. You can do the same thing for like any of these documents you see here. That's one way to discover what's in Prospector. And then in Encore, what you can do is use the tag clouds or the facets to limit to a particular e-resource, or to limit by subject. So in general, though, what's limited, most ebooks from commercial publishers and aggregators, and then if they are, on a single, from a single aggregator, you'll see them all on the same record usually in Prospector. One of the other challenges we have is how we display ebooks in Prospector. So there, as you know, there's a master record in Prospector, and that has a URL. The problem is that master record holder, the URL, it's inherited from the master record owner, so that's going to be the URL that you see, even if other libraries have a different URL. So it makes it a little bit tricky. That's one of the reasons we ask libraries, even if they're not going to lend their books or ebooks in Prospector, to contribute the records, because it may be that your library, your patron, bookmarks Prospector and tends to go to the Prospector catalog before they go to their own local catalog. And so you want to make sure that what they're seeing in Prospector is also what they would see at the local level. And so we do encourage libraries to contribute, even if the items are not, you can't loan them, or you can't, they don't let them borrow them. And this just shows some example of how things are labeled differently. So this first one, the U.S. Climate Action Partnership, happens to be open access. You wouldn't necessarily know this. It just says connect to online resource. And that's because that's the phrase or the terminology that the master record holder uses. So you just have to click on things, and if you can get to them, then they're open access. And if you can't, then it means they're not open access. And that's kind of the general rule of thumb we've adopted with Prospector. In this second case, only accessible to 2 libraries. But again, you wouldn't know that necessarily from the brief record here. And then we're looking at this record, and you can see local use only. So that one, or if you clicked on either of these, you're going to be challenged with the proxy or some type of authentication to get in. Another issue that comes up, and this probably happens in your local catalog too, but can I download an ebook to an e-reader? And again, this is one of those conditional questions. It really just depends on what the publisher or aggregator gives us for a download option. What ebook reader do you have? And this is why you have experts at your local library who can help patrons with this sort of a thing. Different publishers and aggregators have different techniques, and I won't even go into all of the different ways this can be done. But this is why, again, we almost have to be ebook technicians, have them on staff to try to figure out what all of this, formats and different devices mean. There is one nice big body of ebooks that are from a publisher, and I think I mentioned this earlier, Springer, that's allowing us to lend books through Prospector. So there's actually 11 libraries who license the Springer ebook package, and now they have back files that go back to 2005. It's approximately 45,000 titles. I think it's actually quite a few more. I looked at this before, and I think they've grown quite a bit. So in Prospector, any patron can get these items. We've set up sort of a back-end way of doing this so that somebody can request it, and as far as they know, the request, they just click request it, say where they want to pick it up, and then that item goes to the borrowing library, to a staff member at the borrowing library of and there's only 4 libraries in Prospector that are actually lenders of the Springer books, but what they will do is go into Springer, get the PDF, and put it on this neutral website. It used to be called You Send It, and now it's called Hightail. But basically, we have sort of this back-end process for requesting. And these are actually quite popular. About 100 titles are lent out per month, and they're very technical books, computer science, health care, things like that, engineering. And then PDFs are sent to patrons owning library. There's no DRM or other restrictions, and it's all allowed in the contract. So they can just download this PDF, they can keep it, and there's no problems with that. But that's the only lender who's said this was okay. I mean, the only publisher. So this screen is an example of Springer, and you can see the full record, and it's a Springer link on these. And when someone clicks request it, the request goes through. And then the patron is alerted with an email from the borrowing library saying, you can go retrieve your ebook from this third-party website, and then they just download it from there. We also have the Oxford Scholarship Online, and again, this is an alliance contract, 9 libraries in the alliance contract, but what they've done, one of the provisions of our contract with Oxford is that other libraries, public or even community colleges in Colorado, have free access, sort of riding on the coattails of the Alliance contract. And so what if a public library would like in on this deal, for example, if you're interested in this in your public, you can contact Oxford, and then they will, as I understand it, get your IP address, and so that allow access to within a certain IP range for you. And so you need to contact Oxford directly to have this happen. A couple of other cool things, and I've already shown this, but in Prospector Classic we have the Find More Resources, where it will go to, if you can't find it in Prospector or there's too many holds, we set you to links to all various websites, Tattered Cover, Amazon, other places, Google Books, where you can get it. And then Google Previews is another thing that is supported in Encore, and I will go in right now and show this, or actually I think I have a screen that shows it. Let's see. So this is the Google Preview. We're sitting at a book record, and if we click on Google Preview, we actually, what it does, it's not shown in this, but you'll get a little preview, kind of like what you get with Amazon, and you can, do a little bit of searching, or like maybe look at the table of contents and like certain selected pieces of the book. So we have that right built into Encore, which is nice. And then this next screen shows the Find More Resources book, which is just available in the Classic interface. And now I'm just going to talk a little bit about the uniqueness of the Prospector collection and some statistics. So you can see here in Prospector actually this is over 12 million unique MARC records, and we just reached 30 million, a little bit over 30 million. And then you can see the breakdown. So there's quite a few records that are held only by one library in Prospector, and that's what's pretty amazing is we have so many similar type libraries, a lot of big academics and big publics, but yet we still have been able to maintain quite a bit of a uniqueness, so everybody's bringing something different to the table. Just to give you an idea of some of the numbers with Prospector, so the smallest population served is Vail with 5,294. The largest is Denver with 605,000. As of this recording, Denver still isn't back in Prospector. They switched library systems a while ago, and we're still doing some testing to get them back in Prospector. The largest number of lens by single site is 95,000, but the average is more around 14,500. The library with the most unique items is about the Health Sciences Library, which is about 42% of things held, I think, solely by them, and then closely followed by Wyoming at 41% with unique items. And then, as I mentioned, we go all the way north into Wyoming, south to Durango, so we're very close to the New Mexico border. Deer Trail is to our east, and then Gateway is beyond Grand Junction to the west. Just some general statistics. So the fulfillment rate is actually pretty decent in Prospector. It's about 85%, so that's out of the requests that are submitted, about 85% of them are fulfilled. The turnaround time is about 3.5 days, and then the annual rate of loss is very small. It's less than 1%. And because it's so small, the committee, the Document Delivery Committee, a few years ago decided to not even exchange money to try to recoup loss because it took more staff time to negotiate than it was worth, the number of lost items. And so this has worked pretty well. There's a reconciliation process at the end of the year where libraries do their best to find each other's items, but we don't exchange money. And then the regional routing, we started that in May of 2011. And then this screen is just to show you the top lenders in Prospector, so you can see Jeffco way up there in Arapahoe and the different ones. So these I think are the top 10. And then we also have the top borrowers. And what you'll notice here is that it levels out pretty nicely. The top lenders, essentially the top lenders and the top borrowers are the same libraries. So that's encouraging to see. This is the Prospector lens per year, and you can see we've gone up a little bit in 12. And we, slowly are making progress, slowly growing, and that's even with ebooks that are harder to lend. Then the database growth per year, you can see this has also been a steady incline with both the bib records and the item records. And we're almost like at, well, we're actually beyond 30 million. This is a bit off. But you can kind of get an idea of the actual item records of how it's grown over the years. We also use Google Analytics on our website to count the visits, and you'll see here the visits over 1 million, and I believe this is, January through, this is the 2012 period. The unique visitors, now what this is actually counting is IP. So for example, a lot of networks are set up where you don't get the same IP address all the time, and so a lot of this uniqueness may be that kind of a case. You know, you're dialing in or you're connecting from home on a Comcast network and you get a different IP address. And so these are probably not unique visitors as we would consider unique individuals coming to the site, but more a function of IPs that change. We also have a 10-minute average duration for the visit, and so people are spending some time on the site. And then sort of in closing, so we do look at Prospector has been going on since we've started it in 1999, and it has been a huge success with patrons and staff. I think because it's patron place holds, that really helps. There's no staff mediation, and I think if they can just do that independently, it's quicker and it's easier for everybody. It has played an important role in delivering materials in time of declining budgets. We've been able to share resources truly. And it also, the collection development use of Prospector it's really nice to have the union catalogs for librarians to be able to see where they can get rid of things because they're already owned by the group, and where maybe they need to do more collection development. So that's been really nice too. So thanks again for sitting in on the presentation, and if you have questions, feel free to contact me at rose@coalliance.org.